Yeah, thanks. I am too.
I'm sorry, folks. Now I can't get back on my computer, but I'm on Linda's, and I wish I could say I've learned a lot through this, but as I tell people, I'm one step barely beyond being a Luddite. So this is uh, uh, anyway. So Stan and I were going to meet at 8:45. I think we have everything. I'm just going to go ahead and give an introduction to him. But before I do that, uh, if you all will use your chat line down there are a couple of notes to you already. Read them. I've got in there how you can get a recording of this. We are recording it, and we'll send to it. Also, there is an indication if you want recordings of any of the rest of these, please contact me, and I'll send you thanks to Jerry Reese over at Village Presbyterian. He's got it on an Earth Care Forum schedule, and I'll send those to you so you can have a recording. This is the last in the series. It's been exciting to have a new way of reaching out to people, and we've had a good response from folks. I have on that chat line also, if you would, a couple of other things. One is you can email me with feedback, which we really appreciate, pros and cons. And we're looking ahead a year. If you have topics or presentations you think that might be helpful in terms of what needs to be considered in Earth Care, why, please send those to me, both the topics and or the presenter. If you need to have any hints, and if any of you have, and I think some of you have been in drawdown workshops, well, you'll see, oh my goodness, probably about 100 areas that are about Earth Care that you can look at, and our suggestions are being made. Also, finally, I'll try to rush through this, has been initiated by the ECO team at First Presbyterian Church in Lawrence. We're an Earth Care congregation, which means that we go through a type of certification project. That is, we audit if we're addressing Earth Care in worship, education, outreach, and the plant itself. It's been a good exercise for us, and I want to encourage you, if any of you are related to faith traditions, if you'll go to your national offices, you'll find amazing resources regarding Earth Care. It's becoming, finally, something that is really of concern. And if you would like to join the ECO team at First Pres from a distance, why, you're certainly welcome. You don't have to have any credentials to do that. Just contact us if you have a passion about Earth Care. We would welcome your participation, but you would also, if you are a part of a group in your Sierra Club or any other group, Audubon, Grassland Heritage, there's so many groups that you can join and participate and be helpful. But we also, as we mentioned before, and I don't want to I'd be remiss if I forgot to do that and say that we are part of LETUS, Lawrence Ecology Teams United Sustainability. And those of you who've been before, you'll be glad this is the last time to list all those. But that's composed of Lawrence Presbyterian Church, the First Presbyterian, the Lawrence Jewish Community Congregation, Unitarian Universalist community here in Lawrence, the Plymouth Congregational, the Oriented Friends, the Quakers, St. John's Evangelists, Catholic, Trinity Episcopal, and the Islamic Center of Lawrence. So that is our advocacy group that we go to the state legislature, city commission, county commission, other areas to advocate, which is more and more a necessity if you're looking at Earth Care. Well, we are fortunate this morning to have Stan Cox with us. Stan is, as you can tell in the presentation, he is a research fellow in ecosphere studies at the Land Institute in Lawrence, in Salina, Kansas, which I imagine most of you are familiar with, has done some wonderful work. He has been previously and still is actually, with the sorghum and plant breeder program, but he now works with the ecosphere studies, which really has to do with limits as we face them into the future. He's an author. He's written a couple of books. The one that you are more familiar with maybe is The Green New Deal and Beyond, Ending the Climate Emergency While We Still Can. And he also has another book, How the World Breaks, Life in Catastrophic Path, from the Caribbean to Siberia. In addition, I have to show you this. Yes Magazine has an article by him, which is excellent. So he comes to us, well, at a certainly appropriate time, giving new hope that we have, I think, on a national stage. But there's much to be done. So Stan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm asking you all, if you will, use the chat lines to write down your questions, your comments, and Stan can either look at those as we go along, or I'll be sure and I'll review them and ask him after his presentation. It's up to him how he wants to handle that. Okay, I think we're ready to go, Stan. Thank you much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Thad, and appreciate the chance to talk with y'all this morning. I'll start with something I read the other day, a more recently published study that really astounded me, showing that the total mass of existing material manufactured or constructed by humans, everything we have, material that we have produced, in the 1960s, that amounted to about 10% of the Earth's total live biological mass on a dry weight basis, which was pretty astounding. But it has now grown to more than 100%. So the stuff that the human economy has made and is out there, still out there, weighs more than all living biomass on Earth. And we've done that in a half century, gone from 10 to 100% in a half century. Now, all of you are aware, of course, of the problems that have arisen out of that and other human activities. The accelerating die-out of species and ecosystems well underway. 40% of all plant species threatened with extinction. And then there's die-offs of entire ecosystems. 85% of wetlands have already been lost. And then industry and farming have caused the Earth's nitrogen and phosphorus cycles to go haywire. That's undermined the viability of both the Earth's natural landscapes and our own ability to produce enough food. Marine ecosystems are collapsing. So you are aware of all this, but of course the one that we talk about most is that the atmosphere is careening now toward a state of runaway warming. So human activity overshooting the Earth's ecological boundaries as it is an existential threat, but the political and economic institutions are doing very little to halt or reverse that overshoot. And we're still faced with attempts by the world's affluent populations to maintain or increase today's scale of material production and consumption and mobility. And that's going to accelerate ecological degradation and would bring an even faster, more catastrophic collapse. And so what we have to do is make a collective decision to respect strict ecological limits and direct society's efforts toward meeting basic human needs rather than profit making, and only do as much and use as much energy and material as we have to do that, and to try to manage a just, humane descent to a lower level of production and consumption. But given all of those problems, there's one that we have to solve on a crash basis more than any other. And that's that if we don't wrangle fossil fuel burning down to zero on a crash schedule, all of the progress in addressing other causes of ecological breakdown will be in vain. If we have great success in reforming our agriculture, which is what we're trying to do at the Land Institute, or in yes, addressing biodiversity loss, any of those things. If we don't get fossil fuels out of the economy and keep them in the ground, then we're not going to succeed with in dealing with these other problems. And so my frustration with the mainstream climate movement, what I call soft climate denial, comes out of that, because they are all you see in any of the mainstream plans are fairly leisurely schedules for eliminating fossil fuels. And a lot of this is based on the assumption that wind and solar energy buildup of those capacities will automatically work through market forces to automatically chase fossil fuels out of the economy. And this is not, I'm going to see, will I be able to share my screen here? Yeah, let's see.
Should be able to.
Yeah. Let's see if I can make.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Oops. And so this is just kind of a graph, no numbers on the axes or anything. It's just time going from left to right, illustrating this prevailing idea that if we just build up renewable energy sources as fast as we can, that in itself will push fossil fuels, the use of fossil fuels down to zero by the deadline. And the necessary deadline, according to the IPCC, of the international thousands of scientists who get together and come up with these things, or the UN emissions gap report, based on those, this has to be within 15 years is where that deadline needs to be. And that's going to be quite a challenge, and it's not something that we can just hope that the market will take care of. And we can't count on the fact that we can even build up that much renewable energy capacity that quickly. When you look at past history, certainly this substitution, automatic compensation for of one source of energy for another has not historically happened. If you go back to the late 19th century, oil here in green started increasing rapidly, as we know, right through the 20th century, but it didn't drive coal out of the market. Our world coal production also continued to go up. And then after World War II, natural gas came in a big way, and oil and coal continued to rise in parallel with gas use. And that's, of course, because growing economies, they will find a way to use any additional energy that's added to the supply. Then in the past decade, there's been on a percentage basis very rapid buildup of wind and solar energy down here at the bottom, but it has not done anything to reduce the total quantity of fossil fuels being used. There's been some reduction in coal, but that's for other reasons, and it's mainly been driven out by gas, not by renewable energy. So we need to do something like this, which is something the market won't do. So oil, gas, and coal, which have been going up like this to the present, it's going to require something like U-turn on the interstate in a tanker truck going 80 miles an hour to try to turn this around and drive fossil fuels out of the economy in a very short time. And so what my colleagues and I have been advocating is for a hard cap on individually on oil, gas, and coal, only permitting a certain number of barrels, tons, or cubic feet out of the ground each year, and reducing that year by year in equal steps every year until we get to zero. So this isn't the cap. It's not a cap and trade. It's what we are calling a cap and adapt, to have this cap that there are no offsets, there are no ways to buy our way out of it. That we it just have to be a statutory reduction, and then we will have to deal with the consequences of doing that, but it's necessary and we have to do it. Now, the kind of energy cornucopians believe that if we do that, that we can still fill in with renewable energy and in fact continue to increase the total supply and have this huge abundance of energy. But the reality is that it's going to be more like this, where the buildup of wind and solar, other renewable energy, cannot keep up and compensate for the extremely rapid decrease in fossil fuel that we've got to that's necessary. So we're going to need to live with a smaller energy supply, and we use such an excess of energy now that that's not necessarily going to be a bad thing, but it will mean focusing on what's essential and not doing and manufacturing a lot of stuff that isn't necessary. Now, once we get to this point and the fossil fuels are gone, then the additional renewable energy that's built up then our supply of energy would start rising again. But for a lot of reasons, which we can get into, it's not going to rise forever, that we're going to end up and this is kind of an arbitrary level here, but some level of energy availability that is less than what we have now, and will need to be in a steady state. Not only because it's because of the difficulty of you get we can only build out so many wind farms and solar parks, but also because we don't want to have as much energy available as we do now, because so much of that energy now is used in ways that exacerbate all of these other planetary boundaries that we've been crossing. So the United States has a per capita continuous flux of industrial energy of about 10,000 watts, compared with, say, the continent of South America, which is about 1,400 watts per capita. We're 10,000. Europe, they have 5,000 or so average. So this and that excessive energy that we're burning is creating all kinds of mischief, including our military and other uses of energy. So let's see. Oh, stop share. This reduction in the quantity of oil, gas, and coal will lead to a necessity for planning of production, for one thing, that we at the national level, and it will also will need, and one hopes through some kind of democratic local control to decide, make decisions collectively about the reduced energy supply coming in. How is that going to be used? Will we need to have the equivalent of World War II era, the War Production Board, which steered resources where they needed to go, a certain quantity into the war effort, which, analogous to today, there will be a certain quantity of resources, including fossil fuels, that will have to go into producing the new energy infrastructure. And then what can and cannot be produced with the remaining energy that for the civilian economy, you might say. World War II, there were also local rationing boards who made a lot of energy decisions, including who got additional stamps for gasoline or fuel oil and heating oil and so forth. But the main thing is that you have to have nationally and eventually internationally a quota of energy that is in not only fossil fuels, but eventually of all energy that's available to use. There is a movement now for what they're calling a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, which would be, of course, it's modeled on the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, to which all the countries of the world have signed. That would be eventually kind of an international version of this declining cap on fossil fuels, and to be done fairly so that nations who already don't have enough energy can have more with assistance to build up their renewable energy, and for the more affluent nations to reduce their fossil fuel use much more rapidly. And so that it's a matter of not only individual responsibility for dealing with this global ecological crisis, but in not just with fossil fuels, but in other areas, we also need national framework that everybody, this means that everybody's playing by the same rules, and that there's sufficiency for everybody. And then that needs to be connected to a global system. Now, clearly, what we've experienced in recent years, and especially the past year, makes that seem like a far-off dream, having that kind of cooperation throughout the country. The pandemic has proven, though, when you don't have coordination nationally, but the catastrophic results of that, and then that leaves the problem of individual responsibility. When you can't even get people to wear masks, it's going to be especially difficult to convince people that they're going to only burn a certain quantity of gasoline every month. So it's the kind of thing, and that's the reason that, going back to where I started, that the mainstream climate movement is they're just talking about electric cars, and we're going to have this abundant life. And the reason is they know the very tough political questions that are going to arise in actually doing what is going to be necessary to prevent a collapse, worldwide ecological collapse. So it's a matter of getting more broader conversation going about what's going to be necessary before we're going to be able to actually get started doing it, and it's got to be done soon. So I haven't been able to see the chat and all, but if y'all have any comments or questions or anything you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, we have quite a few on the chat line here. Another confusion. Sorry, you're not able to see that.
Oh, I can see it now.
They start up there with a question with history since 1950 of nuclear power submarines. Why wouldn't that system be available to be constructed near many metropolitan cities?
Okay.
And then you go down from there. I'll just let you kind of take
it. Well, there's pretty broad agreement in the scientific community that nuclear power is not going to be the answer, and that's for because of all of the questions that have plagued the industry over the decades, and including the risk of accidents, the accumulation of waste, and the necessity to protect humanity and the living world from those waste for 10,000 or 100,000 years. And even, what was it, last year or the year before, a group of pro-nuclear scientists, these are people who've been working for years to get it to work, wrote a paper saying that the nuclear industry is going to die out, that new conventional plants are not going to be built, and this kind of speculative new generation of plants that might be safer cannot be. It's by the time that could be fully developed and deployed, that it would be, we'd be several decades into the time when we need to be eliminating fossil fuels. So they would not be able to compensate for fossil fuels. So these guys were saying, yeah, forget about nuclear. Let's see. Thad, did you have another one you wanted to?
A couple of them here. One, just, well, your graph showing the global energy usage in general, or just North America?
Oh, well, that was global. That one that showed past historic uses.
Okay, and then along with that, it says, if global energy usage, is it reasonable to expect that global energy demand will go down, considering future increasing demand in developing nations?
Well, it's going to have to, or at least the use of fossil fuels is going to have to go down. But as they are saying with this non-proliferation treaty, developing nations that already have low carbon emissions, low consumption of fossil fuels, mainly because they can't afford more, they would need to be allowed to continue using fossil fuels longer than countries like the US or regions like the European Union, where the cutting will be much easier. It always comes down to talking about China, and there it's going to be, as here, as everywhere actually, it's going to be a matter of dealing with inequality, because you've got to, to a lesser extent in this country, segments of the population that are way over consuming energy and fossil fuels, and then others who are in deficit. So it's going that we're never going to make that U-turn at 80 miles an hour unless we deal with the problem of unequal access to energy and to the basic needs of life.
Well, there is a message here about the film. I think I'm familiar with it, but the film Kiss the Ground, that the regenerative agriculture can put carbon back into the ground at a scale sufficient to help reverse global warming. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, at the Land Institute, we get a lot of questions about this. And it is true that that there is potential to store more organic matter, which means carbon, in the soil. And the main reason that we have a chance to do that is that that 100 and starting a century and a half ago or so, and say, to take this part of the world as an example, we had there were very carbon-rich prairie soils that then European settlers came in and plowed up and have farmed since that time, and steadily depleting the amount of carbon in those soils. And so if we do as what we're working on at the Land Institute, develop perennial grain crops and other crops that can reverse that trend to restore the function that the prairie had, that will get more carbon back into the soil. But you can't just keep force feeding carbon into the soil forever. That it can replace and get us back to what the soil carbon level was in 1850 maybe, but it won't, it can't keep storing carbon. So there's an idea that we can use plants to capture carbon at such a scale that we won't have to stop using fossil fuels. We can burn the fossil carbon, and then the plants will grab it out of the air and put it back into the soil. And there are a lot of very extreme claims being made about this, for both cropping systems, ranching systems, all of these things. But they are greatly exaggerated. So we should be doing a lot of that stuff for all kinds of reasons, just for the ecological health of the soil and the ecosystems. But as a mechanism to solve the problem of climate change, it's just a small part of that.
We got a question from a woman in Pennsylvania, and we got folks online from Iowa and other places too. But she says, "I'm from Western PA. There doesn't seem to be concern about leaving any fossil fuel in the ground for the future, based on increased fracking and now plastic manufacturing plants going up to do something with all the fossil fuels, I assume." I think she's really talking about how in the world we're really going to get this done in terms of leaving the fossil fuel.
Well, yeah, the use of fossil fuels for purposes other than energy, including plastics and all sorts of materials, that's going to be one of the most difficult things. It's going to mean that probably we'll still be using them for some of those purposes after we've stopped using them for general energy production. But making plastic, some of the carbon is from the fossil fuels it becomes part of the plastic, and some of the other is combusted to provide energy to manufacture the plastic. And so if we convert completely to biological materials for everything, it's going to mean we're just going to have to manufacture a whole lot less stuff, which we're going to have to do anyway.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I do know. I have a question here from she was at one time an intern at the Land Institute.
Oh.
What do you think is the main thing I can do personally to start addressing such large-scale fossil fuel reduction?
Well, what we've seen since about 2018, well, going back to 2016, I guess, with the Dakota Access Pipeline, even before that, the anti-pipeline movement, and then when the Green New Deal idea started building up in 2018, we got the Sunrise Movement, the school climate strikes, Extinction Rebellion, and that created a tremendous amount of desire or momentum for doing something about climate, and going beyond what people could do individually, and that it was really building momentum when the pandemic hit, and that sort of undercut the ability for this mass movement type thing. But still, all of last year, the polls were coming out showing that climate was working its way up the list of items that public opinion polls were asking about. What is your biggest concern? And that has become, I think, manifest in the incoming Biden administration talking a lot about climate. But the problem is that they're still looking at gradualist solutions. And so I think keeping up pressure on elected leaders at all levels, in local and state, and Congress and the White House, to do more than John Kerry is the big climate envoy now. He came on last week on a press conference or something. His evidence that we're making progress on climate was that the highest valued stock on Wall Street right now is Tesla. He thought this was a big sign. And he said, I rode here in an electric car today and it was great. And so we need more. And I think once we get a little farther in getting the pandemic under control, that the mass movement part of this will get going again.
Well, there's a question here from says James Hansen has been promoting the thorium-based nuclear option with less problems with safety, waste, and nuclear proliferation. Has he backed off on this as a partial solution?
I haven't kept up with where that's going and what he's been doing, but I know that the thorium thing always comes up, and it's still apparently speculative. I know they're the so-called eco-modernists who are wanting to go mine thorium out of asteroids and bring it back to Earth. And but as far as I know, this I was really disappointed to see that Hansen has become a nuclear advocate, because that in the end is a suicidal path.
Well, there's a concern here. Is there any solution to the release of more CO2 from the melting of permafrost in Siberia and Canada due to climate warming? You think there's any solution?
Yeah, that's the only solution to that, is to cut emissions from everywhere else as fast as we can, because that is one of those so-called tipping points that we don't want to reach. Now, I have read that they may be overestimating the quantity of carbon that would come out of there, but it would be catastrophic if we had a complete meltdown of the permafrost.
Well, there's several questions here around population. The whole issue, is there any chance of reducing it? In the 60s, we were much more aware of zero population growth. And along with that is a question addressed to you: what's the current position in lieu of our projected ecological collapse and the ongoing sixth mass extinction event on human population control or sustainable human limits? It's really a population consumption issue. You want to comment on that?
Well, there are different, all populations aren't the same. For in ecological impact, the one average American counts as about 10 people living in average people living in India, for example. But we have to control the things we can control. We can do something about production and consumption and the ecological impact per person. The only thing that is has in an acceptable way reduced reproduction, human reproduction, has been economic security, not necessarily affluence, but economic security and women's reproductive rights and access to contraception. And so, yeah, all of those things have to be part of it. But otherwise, the human, it is true that the Earth at this point is not able to sustain with a decent quality of life 9 or 10 billion people. The population, human population of the Earth is going to go down. What we have to do is to ensure that we have societies in which that's going to happen in a humane and ecologically restorative way, and not in a Mad Max type world.
Do you excuse me?
Oh, sorry, I couldn't understand.
Do you know what countries are doing a good job of limiting the use of fossil fuels?
I guess it's the ones who can't afford more fossil fuels. There's a lot of talk about countries that are able to continue increasing their GDP by and at the same time reducing their carbon emissions. This so-called decarbonization of their economy in mainly European countries, but this is an illusion, because the emissions that are in those analyses, the only emissions that are being counted are the emissions being produced within the borders of, say, Denmark or whatever country. When you also count the emissions that are embodied in goods that are manufactured elsewhere and they import into the country, then and that should be charged to their country, then you don't see increasing wealth alongside decreasing carbon emissions. So until countries accept that they are not going to be able to increase their GDP and at the same time reduce carbon emissions, they're going to just keep emitting, I'm afraid.
I know it's kind of like a ping pong match here with some questions coming and going, but
Yeah.
we got I know another one about population control and talking about the birth rates that are falling in modern societies. And then there's certainly a lot going on now about educating girls, and not only in this country, but across the world, and decreasing population control. But along with that is a question is that, is there any feasibility of zero population growth? And if we did have it, if we had a zero, how would it affect economic stability and equity if we did have that zero population growth? Now, just a
Well,
simple question you can answer.
yeah, well, as I was saying, we, maybe not we, but our descendants, and maybe in the not too distant future, are going to see zero population growth and degrowth, and that's going to be something that, well, in which it's already been seen, say in Russia, Eastern Europe, and so forth. And the thing that everybody worries about is that you have an aging population and not enough working age people. But if in a world where we're producing and consuming less, there's less need for the labor force doesn't have to be as large, and it's a problem that can be worked out, I think, but that'll be something that people will have to deal with in the future. My bigger worry is on NPR the other day on that program 1A, there were these people, I think a science journalist and then a person who was actually in research, and they were, it started out sounding like they were going to discuss all these fads, things that are, everybody's wanting to extend their life, and a lot of quack remedies, but then they got into genetic manipulation and so forth, and they were saying it's not a question of if, or a question of when we'll be able to extend the human life to 300 years. And so they were saying, so we better, if it can be done, it will be done, and we better learn to adapt to it. But that would be, yeah, you can imagine all of the consequences of that, and including the huge impact on population. So that's clearly not, these kind of fantasies about what the future is going to be like are just not taking into account the resource constraints on that it would, that's just a complete absurdity. But they were already talking about how we'll have to figure out how to adapt to a whole bunch of people who spend 235 years in retirement, I guess. I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah, well, they'll probably learn how to. Well, some other people, they keep coming back here, which I understand about thorium being in Missouri, and early development of nuclear power was a major alternative. But also the people brought up, even if you do have your nuclear, there's the issue of water for cooling, and water is really a problem right now.
Also, there are huge greenhouse emissions associated with building nuclear power facilities, and it takes a long time, or it would, to build up that very large capacity, and before they were producing any energy. And so by the time all of that new power comes online, we would already be through the couple of decades when we have to be eliminating emissions. And so that's not, doesn't solve the problem of where do we get our energy while we're getting rid of fossil fuel.
There's not, there's a question or just a comment that seems to come out. It just, it really raises the question, do we have the political will to go in this direction? It will be a challenge, I think.
Yes, and and that's one that I don't think anybody has the answer for, but I think we have to keep saying that, this has to be done, and not just talk about what we think. Because if we cut back to what we believe is going to be acceptable to, say, 80–90% of the population, then we're not really going to do anything. So but we do have this, I don't know if it's 30% of the population, what it is, who or it's hard to see how they're ever going to accept anything when you look at the past year and what they've refused to accept. So that's going to be difficult.
Well, adding on to that, there is a comment that's made here, and I appreciate, because the way it illustrates is a woman that's lived in Haiti. She talked about the lack of fossil fuels there meant extreme forest destruction because the people needed fuel for cooking. And so they increased the propane use to protect the environment. And then electricity would allow students to study after dark. It really comes down to a balance of use, as she proposes. So it is, the complexity is very much there.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Those are the kind of things what energy we do have need to go into those necessary uses, and certainly we don't want to try to substitute wood for fossil fuels. So we do need to build up renewable energy in places around the world who are already in energy deficit. But that also, not deforestation, but the amount of mining of the metals that are going to be required for batteries, wind turbines, all of these things, the lithium, cobalt, nickel, silver, is going to be have huge environmental impacts, and there's got to be limitations on that mining and processing that will be necessary, and to only do as much of it as is necessary, and to protect workers and the environment who are involved in it, because there's a lot of horrible stuff going on around in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Bolivia, other places today.
Yeah, I think your answer really addresses in a way some comments that are being made about, well, can rooftop solar be helpful? It takes mining, et cetera, for that. And then the whole issue, not everybody can afford solar and a battery system. And the issue of shipping solar pieces now from China, all that energy used to bring it here. So it just continues to be complex.
Yes.
Well, you got any final comments you want to leave us with, Stan?
Well, I apologize for painting a fairly bleak picture, but I think we have to focus on what what we, you know, the benefits of reducing the amount of production, mobility, et cetera, that is going to be required. I know I finished the Green New Deal and beyond last year. I was finishing it up at about this time last year, and in one place in there, I said, "What if we had a mass boycott of air travel? If just collectively we decide, you know, it's a miserable experience. You know, except when absolutely necessary, we could, you know, just bring down that whole system." And I was kind of snickering to myself as I wrote it and said, yeah, like that's going to really happen. And then about a month after I wrote that, we had a 95% reduction in air travel. And so, and the world didn't come to an end. So I think big changes can happen. And but it has, you know, has to be done in a more organized, thoughtful way than that happened.
Well, it's been good. I know it's reality needs to be addressed, or otherwise we won't deal with the future. Okay. So appreciate your time and effort as a scientist, and all the time you put into this and the research that's ongoing there at the Land Institute. So thank you very much for being with us. And again, folks that have been on, thank you for being here, the new ones and the ones that are veterans of this series. Why, please note again, if you want the recordings or you have suggestions and feedback, why, please be in contact with us, and we will do the best we can in terms of looking ahead. And there'll be other issues. If you'd like to be notified of other concerns that come up that are going to be on Zoom, you know, email me, and we'll certainly hopefully not inundate you, but there'll be some important things that maybe you want to participate, including advocacy at your local, state, county, national, etc. So, okay.
Yeah, thanks for all your efforts.
All right, thank you much. Appreciate it. Goodbye, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Did you put your email on there?
It's up here.
Okay.
Thank you.